This info piece covers all the concepts behind the set building process in MH. This is not an in-depth be-all end-all type of guide, but merely intends to serve as an overview of what goes into proper set building. Given the nature of this topic, although there won't be in-depth calculations, there will be numbers, and this is non-negotiable. You have been warned. As a friend and fellow theory crafter put it, because of the circular independent nature of this topic, I've divided it into 9 concepts, which I will discuss here to help give an overview on the matter. These are: why we optimize for damage in the first place, what is budget, skill efficiency, coherence, what is it and can I have one, uptime, experience, target audience, matchup considerations, and tools. I would like to extend my thanks to Upgrade and Pilgrim, which you might recognize from the Horn and DB guides respectively, for helping me conceptualize and proofreading. Almost every mechanic in Monster Hunter is governed by damage. Part breaks, topples, flinches, even things like Elatrion's Eschaton Judgment, alongside obviously hunt length, and thus overall efficiency are tied to damage dealt. The difference in performance between an optimized set and an unoptimized set is measurable. In this example, I'm hunting a Chatacabra. On the top half, I used the 2-piece full gore variant. On the bottom half, I'm naked. As you can see, even though it's just a low-ranked Chatacabra, the difference is more than marginal. Naked sneak attack dealt 268.4 damage, while the stat version dealt 380.4, a difference of about 40%. This is on the extreme side of things, but also to be expected if an optimized set is pitted against something like a support or extremely status-oriented set, which typically can't fit standard damage skills. The naked full release dealt 714.3 damage, whereas the meta contender set dealt 1114.4, a difference of over 50%. Both sets took 2 full releases to kill. The naked one needed 2 focus strikes and only killed after the second full release, while the optimized one took only 1 and killed with the second full release. Without going super in-depth, this difference scales with monster health. The stark difference stems from the set being built with an understanding of how damage works. Crit is so strong because it scales with every raw source. This will be amplified once the budget, covered later, for sets increases. More damage results in more topples and flinches, thus less monster actions, thus even more damage and thus a faster hunt time, meaning even less monster actions, so overall less time spent potentially making mistakes. An alternative way to think about this is, you get to hunt more monsters in the same time frame. While the single biggest factor for all of these things is player skill, stats play a huge role in making your life easier or sometimes offering a different playstyle depending on weapon choice and other specifics. Typically speaking, armor has skills and slots. Slots are used for decorations, which grant skills. This means there is a direct translation from slots to skills, which in turn means we can assign a number to every armor piece to denote how many points they give. Here are some examples. Sunbreak has the Jaggy Gauntlets X, which grants 3 points of attack boost and 2 level 1 slots. This would be roughly equivalent to 3 level 2 slots worth of skills. Rise going with the RNG charm system also produced this charm for me, 3 points of attack boost and a level 4 slot. This is equivalent to 5 level 2 slots, mostly because 4 slots typically grant 2 points towards skills usually found on 2 slots. Additionally, Curious Crafting, or Crafting for short, can add slots or skills to armor pieces. Let's generally assume a +1. Meaning a typical set from that era should have 5 pieces with an efficiency of 3 from the Jaggy Hand example, plus 1 from crafting for 20 level 2 slots worth of skills, on top of 5 points from a talisman. Showing now is the set I used for the Diablos run. 7 points towards attack boost, 5 points of resentment, 3 points each towards critical boost, weakness exploit, maximize, protective polish and rapid morph, 2 points of power prolonger and 1 point each towards critical eye, evade extender and chain crit, now burst. This totals 32 level 2 slots. Let's do the same comparison with a different piece of armor, the Onmyo Tekko, which has an equivalent of 5 2 slots. 2 as a conversion from the 2 points of agitator and the 3 level 2 slots. Adding in the assumed extra skill from crafting, the budget increase by this piece is 6, which results in a 5x6 budget from gear, plus 6 from charm and plus 2 from the weapon, totaling 38. Just as the set I used on a Macron run. The skills are 7 points of attack boost, 5 points of agitator, 3 points of each crit boost, wax, max might handicraft, which for all intents and purposes are about equivalent to a 2-slot skill. Protective Polish and Rapid Morph. 2 points of Resentment and Power Prolonger, and 1 point of Crit Eye, Critical Element and Burst. Note that I only count the skills I actively care about here. This totals 37 2-slot adjacent skills. This means there's 2 ways to look at budget. First, on a per slot basis and as an average. From the first example, Shaggy Hands are just terribly inefficient but didn't have strong alternatives for the niche it filled. The second way is to build a set first, and then work your way backwards. Towards the end of Sunbreak's update cycle, this was the easier method, as crafting now included unslottable skills, which were the preferred thing to craft on gear. Set Bony can sometimes offset low per piece efficiency, but require a more holistic look at the actual set's performance, both as a standalone or in comparison. As the third and last example, let's look at the 4-piece Gore set in Wilds. The helmet offers a 3-slot or no skills that are of interest from a Swag's perspective. The chest piece has a 3-slot and again no skills. The arms offer 2 2-slots, the coil a 3 and a 2, and the feet a 3-1-1 combination, and antivirus a 1-slot we do care about. On average, this means that every relevant piece offers 1 point towards skills we care about, which in Wilds are typically restricted to level 3 slots. This translated to 4 level 3s. 2 slots can sometimes be useful too, again for swags, that's Counter-Strike and Max Might. We like skills such as Agitate and Wax, so in order to fit everything, we need a budget of 10 level 3s and 6 level 2s. What Gore offers instead, however, is a 2-piece bonus which regularly applies Frenzy. This grants 15% affinity. With Antivirus 3, which is gained by the feat alone, that's 25%. Affinity is as strong as ever, being one of the only post modifiers, meaning it scales with everything raw, which is more than enough to make up for the otherwise weak pieces in this set. An Agitator Gore variant will usually run Aggie 4, Max Might and Counter-Strike 3 on an Artian weapon, which then fits Power Prolonger 3 and Critical Boost 5. Budget helps us understand sets that are straight up impossible to build, and can be used as an indicator for overall power level. Greater budget usually translates to element being more relevant, as there are more skills to scale it. Because of the limitations of budgets, concessions have to be made. Luckily, not all skill levels are equal. Let's look at some examples. Right off the bat we can see Adrenaline Rush 1 and 3 are about equally efficient in their impact on a per level basis, with 2 being the odd one out for the Sunbreak version. In Wilds, we see that level 1 starts off strong, but every subsequent level drops more and more. Skills where 1 point is the most efficient and desirable outcome are usually referred to as front-loaded or 1-point wonders in some circumstances. Mail of Hellfire is another such example, but exclusively so for raw sets. For element sets, it's the opposite. Level 1 grants 5%, but level 3 grants 20%. This skill is backloaded. You go all in on it. Both of these types of skills have many examples. The next skill I'd like to take a look at is Attack Boost, Rise's version in particular. The first 3 levels are about half as efficient as the remaining 4, but then we see something weird. Levels 4 and 6 are just about equal, level 7 is the most efficient on a per point basis, but level 5 is comparably weak. This is where efficiency kicks in. If your set has enough room for Attack Boost 5 and it is slotted in, you could instead opt for Attack Boost 4 and Adrenaline Rush from earlier, which would gain a total of about 34 raw compared to the 29 AB5 offers by itself. The last thing I want to look at is Resentment. In both Wilds and Rise, Resentment grants plus 5 raw per level, linearly. This would lead one to believe that the efficiency of this skill also increases linearly. Amazingly, this is not the case. This is a hyper-specific situation that involves rounding, or rather how Monster Hunter handles rounding. If your raw ends in a 5 in a step of the damage calculation before post modifiers are applied, odd levels potentially bump you up over a rounding threshold. If it doesn't, even levels are preferred. When faced with the task of fitting multiple percent skills, the rule of squares applies. The most efficient way to handle these is to get as close to a square as possible. Plotting 5% and 15% essentially equals 1.05 times 1.15 in calculation, which equals 1.2075. Redistributing these to be 10 and 10% we get 1.1 times 1.1, which is 1.21. The difference in isolation seems abysmally small, but these things can blow up really quickly with sufficiently strong sets. As an extension of the preamble, we also just learned why EFR, or effective roll, isn't a great metric. A 40 to 50% damage difference didn't translate to a 40 to 50% hunt time difference. As a very simple example, assume you can hit for 10,000 damage. Any given monster has 30,000 health. You will need 3 hits to kill it. Now assume you gain 45% more damage, hitting for 14,500. 2 attacks are then still 1,000 short of actually killing the target. The clear time would be the same, and nothing of value would be gained. In reality, this is much more complex, but it's easy enough to visualize and offers more visualization than EFR. There's more here that I will not go over, but these examples should suffice to get the point across. Some skills, while strong, may not warrant opting in to the maximum available level. Some skills do roughly the same thing, but don't work well together. An example of this is Counter-Strike and Adrenaline Rush, where one wants you to get hit and the other needs a iframe. On paper, a set incorporating both will be stronger than just opting for one or the other. In reality, juggling the uptime on both will just hinder your game plan. This is incoherence by game plan. This usually applies when there are too many different conditions that need fulfilling for a set to be played to its fullest. Peak performance and resentment are in a similar boat. These don't go together, as one needs you to be at completely maxed HP while the other needs you to have red HP. These are incoherent because of incompatibility. Other things that fall into this category are elemental attacks for elements your weapon doesn't have, like water attack on the Rathalos weapon. This generally applies when there are skills with opposing conditions. A third type of incoherence is incoherence by budget. An example of this is the bit of everything lance. Where there are attempts at combining iframes with skills like Evade Window and sometimes Extender, Adrenaline Rush and Blaze Scale Hone, in conjunction with guard skills like Guard, Guard Up, Offensive Guard. Sunbreak introduced Flaming Espiners to mainline, which has the gimmick of being fire weapons with poison attributes. The problem is budget. A set that just incorporates every option is simply not possible. Incoherence by budget means that there's too many concepts at play. Sets that go that route are often impossible to play because of all the conditionals and their short timers. Besides these obvious examples, there are some that go a bit deeper and are harder to spot, like Agitator on sleep weapons or exhaust files, or Beatnik's exploit and elemental exploit in some cases. Understanding this is key. In conjunction with section 2 budget, this understanding also helps in determining general archetypes, like evasion-based sets or elemental sets, which usually require greater budget and scale better than raw sets do. Easy examples for playstyle altering skills are the ammo type up ones from bowguns, or guard and guard up versus evasion on old gen lands, or frenzied bloodlust for swags and sunbreak, which enable a more counter-focused playstyle. There are also enabler skills, like dereliction for resentment and potentially even heroics, or bloodrite for blood awakening, or berserk for max madness drive. When playing casually, uptime matters, but not nearly to the degree many people believe. Uptime refers to the amount of time a skill is active for in relation to another factor of time. Some opt for that factor to be the overall hunt time, some prefer time in combat, and others operate on a hit count principle. All of these have different strengths and weaknesses. Despite this, however, some skills are completely hampered by the uptime component, while others face non-obvious competition and considerations. Take Foray for example. In the background footage, you can currently see a hunt on Raidao using the Rathian Switch Axe, which is a poisoned weapon with an element file, critical status 3 and poison duration up. The set does not use Foray. Remember that skill is only ever active while the monster you're hitting is poisoned or paralyzed. In total, this hunt had 4 minutes and 22 seconds of combat. Poison ticked for 1 minute and 8 seconds, or about 26% of the total duration. This means that Foray would be active for about 26% of the hunt. At level 5, Foray would grant 15 attack and 20% affinity while active. Combining these two snippets of information, we can calculate Foray would grant, on average, 3.9 raw and 5.2% affinity over the course of this hunt. We learn, while great on paper, it just doesn't translate into an actual hunt. And that is without accounting for the opportunity cost of using a poison weapon over something like Para, Sleep, Blast, or a matching element. For the reasons outlined above, when interacting with casual players, I typically prefer play-dependent uptime or conditional skills, as they are more predictable. For advanced folk, some monster dependents like Coalescence or Agitator can perform better. The much more interesting way to look at and toy with uptimes is in speedrun scenarios. When playing just casually, uptime is not the greatest issue. Some games, like Wilds, also just lack alternatives to skills like Agitator or Maximite, in terms of efficiency, or skills that offer alternative playstyles or enable certain set building ideas. Once hunt times become faster, to the point that you optimize for hunts that go below 2 or 3 minutes, uptime becomes much more interesting. This is especially important for single quest speedruns, as the rules within those differ from standard gameplay. Usually for those, you can assume uptimes of upwards of 90% on the important skills, as consistency is of very little importance in these scenarios. This is also why speedrun optimized sets are not great for casual gaming. There's neither space nor interest for consistency. Speedruns can often find use for skills typically considered bad because of their low uptime, heroics, latent power, ambush, even sacrificing what would otherwise be core skills like Counter-Strike, as those just don't come up. Because of the vastly different approach in building for yourselves and others versus building for speedruns, optimizing for damage or DPS is ideal for everyone, not just runners. As an analogy, I don't optimize for damage because I don't speedrun is the Monster Hunter equivalent of I don't want to lift weights because I don't want to become a bodybuilder. Like most other real-life skills, experience helps when building sets too, and can be an active detriment. Experience can help with sussing out good skills and combinations ahead of time, like when rummaging through data mines and such, or when making general assumptions about uptime and accuracy when crafting sets for others. The same experience, however, can also be a detriment when it turns into ego. Handling this is generally a great ability to pick up. There's always room for improvement, and especially when picking up set building, this needs to be learned and understood to a similar degree as speedrunning. Just because your favorite creator said or did X does not mean that there is no objective truth other than X. An openness to critique and arguments, not the internet fight type but the constructive chat type, is paramount in helping you get better at it, give better advice, and ultimately get more out of your sets. Take these two sets here for example. Which one would you recommend? If your answer was the set on the left, or if your answer was the set on the right, you're wrong. The correct answer is, it depends. One of them deals objectively more damage than the other. Parameters you don't know and couldn't account for was that a person was playing like this. With experience also comes the ability to ask and answer questions such as, what is your player skill? What is the tangible difference between set 1 and 2? How to improve in this or that matchup? Why is skill X recommended or better than skill Y? Real talk for a second. I don't personally care what you use, and anyone that does care what you use can go eat shit. Game's expensive, and even more so considering the hardware requirements. It's fine to play casually, and I personally hate the negative connotation that is associated with that. Both advisors and advice seekers deserve basic human respect. Specifically for the advisors, don't jump to conclusions and blindly parrot what a guide somewhere says. Make sure whoever you're talking to understands why you suggest the things you suggest. Specifically for the advice seekers, most, if not all, people you'll be asking are unpaid and do it as a hobby. They know the pain of looking for accurate information. Be patient, and most importantly, don't go into places guns blazing, showcasing your new dysfunctional hotness as the best thing since sliced bread. Experience can save you a lot of legwork and crunching, and is best gained through just playing the game and paying attention, recording and rewatching footage, playing with other people and paying attention to their performance, and so on. Anyone can be the target audience. A friend, strangers on the internet, even yourself, and most of them will play differently. Having a general understanding of what the target's skill level is as a player, and a rough idea of what the uptimes on skills are based on their player skill, is an important thing to learn. In stark contrast to that are speedruns. These need additional questions answered, such as what is the rule set, which script is used, are there mods in play and if so which? Usually in terms of budget or eliminating RNG factors like monster size or endemic life. What's the goal time? How do uptime phases line up? Runs usually don't care about how hard it is to play a set or how consistent it is. They have a power very few casual players have. Menu right, down, 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 accept, left, accept. Concerns of consistency simply don't apply. This is the very reason why optimizing sets is very different from building for a speedrun. This is a common misconception. Most casual players will likely not play at a high level, with optimal punishes and cool interactions, often play in groups and have a lot of other stuff going on as well. They're unlikely to use a skill like Heroics to its fullest, or get much enjoyment out of Adrenaline Rush sets with Evade Window 0. Examples are skills like Latent Power, Heroics or Ambush. All three of these are typically bad, but can shine under the right conditions. Ambush can easily substitute for Counter-Strike if the hunt only takes 1 minute and the monster doesn't get to move to begin with. Latent Power might be good for you if on average you take 15 minutes to kill a target monster. Heroics, while a strong speedrun only skill, is sometimes not even great for running. Take the background clip for example. Had I opted for Heroics here, I would have given up other key skills, resulting in less damage and thus a slower overall time. And it probably still wouldn't have activated. The key is understanding who you're talking to and building for. The method of someone who cannot stop rolling is different from the method for someone trying to optimize for draw attacks only. Different players play differently. Different monsters also behave differently. Some monsters are weak to elements, others aren't. Some are easily impaired by certain status conditions or have different preferred hit zones. Some are easily locked down entirely by hitting the legs, trading damage for uptime and ease. These things I consider basic knowledge and matchup understanding. Going a little deeper, things like Dragon Blight on elementally weak monsters, or when there's a lot of micro and macro positioning with Hops and the like, which can cut into maximite uptime. Or special enrage mechanics, like Guardian monsters or Zonoga. Or common environmental damage, like the Volcano for resentment activation, Ice and Water Blight for maximite uptime, Thunder Blight as a consideration against Hyper Armor and Counter-Strike, just to name a few. Leaving the feels and experience sphere, there's hard data. This includes exact values for hit zones, understanding the trade-offs when going for alternative hit zones or part breaks, uptime on certain hit zones, secondary and tertiary hit zones, and how often they are accidentally hit, their impact on sharpness mitigation. Timings of paralysis or blast proc flinches, exhaust dunking for better uptime instead of paper damage are additional considerations that can be made at this stage. It all depends on target audience and intent. This section is one of many that can go really, really deep and eat a lot of time. Whenever you reach this stage of optimization, I recommend taking a step back and considering if it's worth it, checking if you're going overboard with it already. The single most important thing you can possibly learn about this is how to find and interpret data about playstyles for the matchups in question, hit zone values, uptimes, and even how to approach testing it for yourself. Set building is one of those hobbies where, at a relatively early point after starting, you'll want to look at numbers. You'll never need to have an in-depth understanding of calculus or graphs or anything similar, but a basic level interest in math is likely required to get enjoyment out of it. At least if virtually everyone I worked or had more in-depth chats with is anything to go by. While a slight barrier of entry, this is nothing to fret about, as there is a multitude of tools at anyone's disposal. The first tool we look at is Robomeki. To use it, we pick a large monster. Let's go with Rathalos. What it does now is showing you the hit zone values for everything with color coding. Additionally, it shows thresholds, by how much they are raised each proc and how effective any given status is. Going even further, you can set it to display base values or adjusted values on a per quest basis, for both single and multiplayer, including the change status thresholds, monster HP and capture threshold. It will take a little while to get used to reading these charts, but there isn't really an alternative to how convenient and information-packed Robomeki is. The next tool I'd like to look at is the AS, short for Armor Set Search. There are different options available, and which one you end up using is preference. Mine is WikiDB. While not terribly obvious in Wilds, the way skills are organized is identical to how the game classifies them, which can be difficult to parse. A standard swag set in Wilds will opt for Agitator, Burst, Counter-Strike, Max Might, and a 4-piece score bonus. Clicking on Search will then present you with options to achieve a set with the skills you selected. Clicking on a search result will open up a more in-depth section about where exactly those skill points come from, which decorations are needed, and so on. The search itself is saved in the URL, making it a really handy tool for sharing searches with others. I cannot stress enough how important it is to always click the More Skills button. This will help suss out which other skills you can fit and optimize slot usage. In other games versions of this, like Rise for example, where RNG is a much more outrageous thing, there are tabs to save crafts and charms. The AS will never use a craft or charm you haven't previously entered. The list of things you have can be exported and saved as a text file, and is saved in your cookies. Be aware of this if you regularly delete them or change browsers or devices often. The last big tool is Spreadsheets. If you don't like them, you will probably not get a lot of enjoyment out of pursuing set building as an in-depth hobby. If you're completely new to the world of table-based calculators, I would recommend starting with simple and easy sheets, like this one I made a bit ago. I use it to track the progress on crowns and titles, as well as to get an idea about stockpiling certain items. The main functions used here are references and checkboxes, with a little bit of conditional formatting to make it look pretty. Checkboxes are what is called a Boolean value. A ticked checkbox is equivalent to the value true, while an unticked one is equivalent to the value false. There are other ways to achieve this, but they do offer a one-click solution with a visual representation. The next thing utilized here are references. On the right side is a list of all hunt-related titles, which is just being referenced here within an if statement. If statements are always in the format of if a condition is met, print or say something, otherwise print a different thing. This if statement, for example, checks whether the number entered in the amount hunted cell is large enough to unlock a given title, and if it is, it will print done instead of the title. Finally, there is a counter function here to track the overall progress. It does that by going through the area or list specified here and counting every cell that has a value of true. Similarly, the tracker for missing crowns counts all cells that have a value of false. To pretty it up and have information stand out more easily, I use conditional formatting. On the title cells, if the text inside the cell is exactly done with an exclamation point, the background will turn green. The same technique is used for the checkboxes, where if the value is true, they will also turn green. Finally, the monster name cells check if both crown boxes are checked and become green if they are. A more visually daunting but still simple example is the sheet I made for my uptime comparison. This sheet only requires the uptime as input and automatically converts them into frames, which then through simple multiplication and division calculates the percentage uptimes. Note that you can expand on the raw number format by using the ampersand character followed by quotation marks, but you cannot easily reuse the contents of that cell if you do. There are functions to do so, but I'm not going to go over them here. Any sheet-adjacent program punishes the user severely for not knowing what they don't know. Once you familiarize yourself with these simple tools, and maybe build 1 or 12 yourself, you'll likely want to get into the nitty-gritty of building an actual calculator. This is an example of a simple calculator I built a little while before the release of Wilds. It mainly utilizes named ranges, dropdowns, if statements that could also be switch statements, and VLOOKUP. Dropdowns are simple cells to make a selection. They have a built-in search function. While manually adding every weapon name to them is an option on paper, a faster way would be to just have a list of them on hand and declare them a named range, and setting your dropdowns to be based on that named range. Since I have a list of swaxes in this table format, I can also use VLOOKUP to search that table for the weapon name and print the value in any given column. VLOOKUP is an amazing tool for simple automation like this. There are other options, and in today's day and age, computing power for tables is rarely an issue, so the choice between VLOOKUP and something like index match is mostly a preferential one. VLOOKUP, and by extension HLOOKUP, is always structured in the following way. Look up this value in that area, and then display whatever is in column X. The last parameter is either true or false, depending on whether your table is sorted or not. For my use cases, they are always unsorted, meaning this parameter is always false. Peeking out on the right are helper cells. They're exactly what they sound like. They help by making simple calculations and lower the amount of formula in any given cell later on, making the formulas less wieldy to use and understand. From there, it's just a matter of rounding, adding and multiplying numbers according to the damage formula, which is its own can of worms that I'm not willing to open for the sake of this info piece. A simple tool like this makes the calculation part much faster and easier, and, if set up well, eliminates a lot of errors you could easily make if you did it by hand instead. Naturally, there are downsides to this tool. Comparing 2 or more sets is a painfully slow process, all things considered. Once your needs outgrow it, you may consider moving on to a more sophisticated one, like these two. The main difference between the previous simple calculator and something like this is a strict splitting of front and back end. It is specifically built to be easily expandable, making everything rather simple. Inputs on the front end, i.e. the set compare sheet, are referenced in the back end, where, on similar principle to before, the damage of any given move or set is calculated. This damage is then referenced in the combo picker, which is just this monstrosity of repeating dropdowns and VLOOKUPs. The result of this calculation is then referenced by the front end to display. Each set has its own special area in the back end, which makes comparisons much easier and less painstaking. The simple calc from before can easily be built within maybe an hour or 3. The backend of this calculator took 3 nerds about 9 hours. Just the backend. While the concepts at play are really simple overall, as I said previously, you're at a severe disadvantage for not knowing what you don't know. To get started, I recommend familiarizing yourself with named ranges, if statements, VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP or index match, as well as dropdowns, dependent dropdowns for things like hit zone dropdowns, rounding, flooring and locking cells. To make the data neat and organized, you'll want to toy around with the basic functions like background and text coloring, borders, and conditional formatting. Even beyond set building and Monster Hunter, spreadsheets are a fantastic skill to pick up and find solid use cases in almost every area in life. Set building is a process. The feelings of many seasoned math folk and builders can often be summed up like this.
Rope? You want it? It's yours, my friend.
And yet, we still return to it, regularly, because it is a unique type of skill expression that autism-fueled spreadsheet nerds derive great pride and pleasure from. While the values themselves change over time, sometimes rapidly and drastically, the general process remains the same. There are many different approaches and starting angles. I, for example, prefer building something out first and playtest whatever I build, and then work my way backwards from there, from testing calculator accuracy to understanding the budget constraints and RNG components. As a guide person, I then tweak those creations consistently, until a reasonably achievable baseline is built. Others prefer a more mathematical approach, with much fancier spreadsheets and even leaning into programming. Some people think that guides about this optimize the fun out of the game, but I, and many others, disagree. Quote-unquote bad sets really just end up gimping you for no benefit. But a set isn't bad just because it doesn't optimize for damage. No matter the goal of any given set, be it having fun or support or best DPS set, the only set you ever need, 3 AM challenge gone sexual giveaway at the end.
3 AM challenge gone sexual.
There's almost always some room for improvement by going through the steps listed above. It's not always about numbers, but they can almost always help. Also, giving names to sets or calling them builds is cringe.